Who's here for jQuery? Who's here for governance? All right. Not bad. I will try to keep things interesting for you. How many of you guys have been to a users group before and seen a presentation on governance? Okay. All right. Okay, so I want to talk for a little bit tonight, and to be fair, when I looked at the website right up until like yesterday, I was the only speaker listed, so I kind of planned on an hour and a half, so I'm sorry for the other guys. I want to talk about technical governance. All right. One of the things that I've noticed in a lot of governance presentations at these types of events is there's a lot of focus on the business and the high level and the forest and the mountains, and not a lot of focus on the technical aspects of your governance plan. Okay, the actual nitty-gritty, the stuff that you actually have to do to accomplish all those things. So real quick introductions first. I work with a company called Xgility. I'm going to linger on this slide for just a second because my boss is here and he's watching me. Xgility is a SharePoint-focused company. All right, we specialize in providing solutions for our customers by rapidly delivering value through agile practices. We've got a wide range of customers, federal, Fortune 50, and we're doing a lot of work in Office 365 now as well. So it's very interesting stuff. Here's some information on me. I'm going to skip because I only have 45 minutes. Here's my contact information. All right, shyster@xgility.com. And my Twitter handle is @Mr_Shyster. For you, those of you who are not familiar with the term shyster, check it out on Wikipedia. It's hilarious. But it comes from my name, S. Hyster. So that's the way it goes. All right. So quick agenda here. Why technical governance? What and how? An outline of your governance plan, which is split into 3 basic subjects: general information, creating a developer's guide for your organization, and creating an administrator's guide for your organization. We covered this a little bit, all right, but why do we want to talk about technical governance? Just to reiterate, it's kind of the how of your governance plan. And in fact, I've been in a lot of meetings where, they start talking about the vision, the business vision for your governance plan, and they spend, 40 minutes of their 45 minutes talking about that. And they don't really talk about the technical details. In fact, some of them will even say, okay, the technical part is a big part of your governance plan, but that's for the technical people, so we'll kind of push that aside. And don't get me wrong, I think that it's very important to talk about vision, and it's very important to talk about the business needs of your organization. I just also think that you have to give it a little bit of perspective, all right, and look at how you're actually going to accomplish it with the resources that you have, all right? So my goal here tonight is to talk about outlining that governance plan and the things that you need to think about from a technical perspective to put into that governance plan. So functional governance. Typically overlooked, it's, in my opinion, the most functional part of your governance plan. This is my GIF of the most useless machine in the world. The machine just turns itself off, so it's kind of an idea that's not functional. Anyway, sorry, bad joke. All right, so first part of your technical governance plan, all right, is creating your technical mission, which is completely different than a vision, okay? I promise. Your technical mission is about what you want to do, how you're going to do it, all right, and how much money you have to accomplish it with. All right, so if we're going to start talking about this, right, we've got to decide first what we're going to do with SharePoint. All right, so what can SharePoint do? That was all right. So I had a couple of things too. It can be used for application support. All right, it can be used to deliver applications. It can be used as a platform for business intelligence. All right, it can be used as a platform for enterprise search. Right, it can do all this cool stuff. Right. So now, how are we going to do that? Okay, and how much is it going to cost us, or how are we going to outline the things that we need to do in order to accomplish that? So, when I do a governance plan, all right, I talked about the first 3 sections, right? General information, developer information, administration information. I like to break those 3 sections into 3 main, right? Presentation information, all right? Presentation information is the stuff that, leadership wants to see, the bosses want to see. They want to see some pretty pictures. They want to see, you know, an architecture diagram or something like that, you know, you kind of satisfy that requirement. Process information, okay, which is how to get stuff done, all right? Things for project managers, things for making requests, etc. And then your actual practical information. The practical information being stuff like things that are practical. Oh, there it is. You know, your actual configuration information, all right, reference information, things that people are going to look at and look for, okay? So in our first area of general information, stuff for leadership, stuff for project managers, right, we're going to go through what we're doing with SharePoint, why we're actually using it. We're going to explain our technical mission, okay? We're going to explain how the document's organized, all right? And we're going to provide reference information, all right? Process, okay? This is important stuff, all right? This is how are we supporting new SharePoint projects, all right? When a new SharePoint project is introduced to the organization, what is our process for saying, okay, you need to get access to TFS, all right? You need a development environment. You need to understand our configuration information, things like that. Project management resources, all right? Common SharePoint sync points with the platform team, the development team, and the network team, and the operations team, all right? We're going to explain all that stuff in this area. Information on our SLAs, what we're promising to do, okay, for the organization when it comes to SharePoint. And then also where to go for help, escalation processes, roles and responsibilities, level of access, things like that. In our practical information, all right, practical setup, we're going to talk about our server, our network information, funny things about our setup, things that, you know, we might not be proud of, but everybody has them. You know, you want to make sure the developers know about stuff that's going on. Our application architecture, patch level, service and web application information, any third-party tools, solutions in the environment, our service catalog, and then you know, things that people might share, cool web parts, shared DL, things like that. Remember, this is in our general information. This is our overview. This is the first section of our document. Okay, all right, so after we do that, all right, we're going to get into our service governance, okay? Service governance is talking about kind of some of the processes and the how and the what we're going to control in the general information section. All right, we'll get to what we're going to control for developers and things like that in that section of the document. But the first section, these are some examples of the things that you're actually going to want to try and control and going to want to write into your technical governance document. Site collection quotas, upload sizes, list view thresholds, your site life cycle, your solution life cycle. What are you doing with stale sites once they're no longer used? What are you doing with solutions that are no longer used? Your maintenance plans, your customization policies, and we'll actually get into more detail with that when we talk with the developers. And then our data protection information, backup, DR, security and access information, antivirus information. This is all stuff that you want to roll up into that general section of your governance document. All right, now the fun stuff, parts that usually get me in trouble. Our developer's guide, all right? So when I'm doing a developer's guide, how many are developers? Yeah? Wow. Guys outnumber me tonight. Administrators? Okay, all right. A couple big guys here that could probably back me up. Yeah, so the developer section, this is the part that developers are going to skip to kind of learn what it is that they're allowed to break, do in our environment. All right, this is usually I try to design this as a breakaway or a tearaway document, a document that can stand alone. All right, so when you're developing this, all right, what's biggest problem with a governance plan?
Nobody reads it.
Nobody reads that. Yeah, it sits on the shelf. Okay. All right. So, how do you get people to read it?
Make it specific to them.
You got two.
I'm giving them the sand anyway.
All right. So make it specific to them. All right. So that's one good way. What else?
You can integrate it into the product. So Mandate
Whether
this.
it's a SharePoint site or whatever, you can integrate it.
Mandate it, sure. All right, that makes you real popular. All right, what else? All right, make it accessible, right?
And train them.
Train them. Okay.
Make it a wiki page, make it so-
Keep it up to date. All right. All right. So
Make it relevant to what they do.
make it relevant to what they do. Okay. All right. So one of the ideas that I found very, very effective, all right, when dealing with governance and developers is giving them access to the information that they need in a couple of different formats. All right. All right. Still, if you pop a 30-page document on their desk when they sign up to do development for your organization and say these are the rules that you have to follow, right? They might look at it. Usually it's when they go to try to deploy something that you have to remind them of all those rules, right? So one of the things that I found pretty effective is to create a SharePoint site that is essentially a collaborative site to work with the developers in your organization, all right, that outlines the rules, that talks about the ideas behind those rules, all right, and gives them access to the information they need. What kind of information do developers need?
Design specs.
Design specs. All right, well, you're talking about the product. All right, I'm not talking about what they're developing. What kind of information do they need about SharePoint?
Like the security, they can do the GAT, or they have a CAS policy, or they
Information, patch level, number of servers in the farm. All right, what else do they need? We catch everything? Maybe we
Does the
did.
developer really need that?
What's that?
Does the developer really need to know how many servers are on the farm?
yes.
Yeah, some of them do. It depends. Okay. If they're developing a web part that you're going to deploy normally and is just going to go in and deploy to every server in the farm, but if they're developing, let's say they're developing a federated search site, all right, using fast search that's coming in and scraping data and then sitting out, and they need to load balance that IIS site across all the servers in the farm, really you should put that on another server, but it doesn't always happen. All right, so they might need something like that. All right. The idea is that we're going to give them quick access in a wiki to the information that they need that's relevant to them, right? I split the developer's guide into 3 sections as well, all right? Practical information, process information, and, presentation information, presentation information, process information, and practical information, all right? Presentation, all right, high-level stuff. Intro to your organization, all right? Explanation of your technical mission and how developers can help you achieve that mission, all right? What's our mission? Anybody have any ideas yet? We didn't really cover it, but are developers going to help you do that? Of course they are. If they know that that's what you need, right? If you can communicate that to them as the mission, right? Do you want another chocolate? If you're communicating with your developers, this is going to be easy. Well, not easy, I'll tell you. Honestly, it's difficult. But it should be easier than if you're just laying down the law for them, all right? That's what this presentation layer of your developer's guide is. It's saying, hey, we want to work with you. We want to reach out and make the platform accessible for everybody so that your customer's happy, so that your solution works, okay? And so that our platform stays stable and we can give 6 nines or whatever it is that we've agreed to do for our platform. Okay. Usually I encourage some kind of project registration process, all right? So when a new project comes on, all right, you meet with the people the administrators, all right? Maybe you meet with operations. Maybe you tour the data center, all right? Maybe you do a couple of things just to remind you that you're part of a much larger process than the code that you're working on, all right? Which is something that even administrators forget about, all right? They will help you maintain the environment if you give them the tools and the information that they need. All right, so process stuff, all right? Set expectations. Explain the deployment process, all right? Provide guidance for source control, all right? I've been in a number of organizations, everybody's complaining that, developers aren't putting stuff in TFS, okay? You go talk to the developers, and what does the developer say?
What's that?
What's TFS? That was you, right? All right. Is everybody tired of chocolate? I can stop throwing them. All right, good. What's TFS? How do I get into it? Where is it? All right. Do you have guidelines set up for actually accessing that environment? No? All right, we should. Okay. Give an overview of the change control process. This one I love, all right? How many organizations have a change control process? All right. How many completely understand the change control process, know who's voting, know who they have to bribe with lunch the day before, the whole 9 yards, right? Usually they're very, very confusing. And you know what? Usually these two things are not my responsibility. You know, as the administrator or the architect, the platform support guy, these aren't my responsibility. But if I want the developers to follow them, I need to nail down these processes and make sure the developers know about them, okay? And then I also provide a list of my requirements to the developers, all right? I set those expectations up front in that project registration, let them know what I'm looking for in order for them to easily get through the process, all right? So let's look at a sample deployment process overview, all right? Before we even start development, all right, we're going to talk about registering the product, our project. We're going to meet with the SharePoint team. We're going to develop a list of sync points. All right, maybe the sync points will be at the finalization of the scope. All right, we'll say, hey, you know what? You're planning to do an HTTP module here, and we're not really allowed to do those in our environment. Maybe we need to think about a different way to do that. Before you spend 3 weeks developing, or 6 weeks developing, or 7 months developing based on this one assumption, all right, let's try and rearrange some stuff. Maybe at the end of the design phase, all right? Administrators don't know development. I don't know what you guys are doing, okay? If you guys go out and you disappear and you start working on stuff and then come back to me and say, deploy this into test, all right, so, or deploy this into pre-production, you know, it helps me to know right from the get-go what we're planning to do. So let's look at our next step here, deploying to pre-production, all right? Usually on that developer site where they're seeing all the information that they need access to, there's also a little button that says submit a deployment request, all right? But sometimes I walk into a place and they're doing development on their local workstations, all right? So we just want to sync up, make sure that that stuff is the same. Basic deployment instructions and basic testing instructions. Now, contact us, let us know what you're doing. We'll go over your solution, we'll sync up, make sure that we understand what's going on, all right? Pull the solution from TFS, deploy it to pre-production, and both go through our testing phases. That way everybody's on the same page. That way you're not coming to me at like 4:30 in the afternoon on a Friday saying, hey, this has got to go to production by Monday morning. Those are fun. All right, and then the final phase of our deployment process is a sample. All right, we submit to the change control gets approved. We submit our deployment request for production. We work with the admin team to deploy the solution into production. They pull it from TFS, and then we both get our testing done. Nice and smooth. And then I've also put in here kind of a sample. This is a short list, but it's some of the things that I ask for as an administrator from the developers before we deploy their solutions. Okay? It's basic stuff. Copy of SP dispose if they're requesting any objects. I want to know that it's been tested, right? Verification that the development environment matches production. All right, pretty simple. Usually, if we can get away with it, we try and also manage and maintain the development environments. The reason I ask for deployment instructions, I get called on that one occasionally. And by occasionally, I mean all the time. They say, aren't you guys SharePoint people? Don't you know how to deploy? This is WSP. Don't you know how to deploy a WSP? Yeah, I know how to deploy a WSP. Okay. Why would I ask for deployment instructions? If I set this expectation up front, okay, then it gets everybody thinking. They're like, oh, okay, he's going to want basic deployment instructions. That means that I have to think about a couple of things. I have to think, oh, you know what? Visual Studio is not installed on the servers. So if I'm using GACUDL to push something out, that's not going to work. Okay. If I'm, manually adding files to the web server, that's not going to work. Okay. If I am trying to run a tool that I downloaded off of CodePlex that hasn't been approved for the environment and I absolutely need it for my deployment, all right, well, I'm going to have to wait 3 weeks for it to go through the change control process before they can run it on the server. All right, it just gets people thinking about things like that. We also ask for this because basic deployment instructions usually includes basic retraction instructions. I don't know how many times I've told you, and I'm sorry to pick on developers. I'm an admin, it's my job. But I don't know how many times I've seen situations where you deploy fine, that's great, works for a couple of weeks, then you go to update or retract and redeploy, and it breaks a bunch of stuff. So like I said, the reason I ask for testing instructions, okay, is the admin team is not prepared to test your solution front to back, all right? That's the developer's job or the testing team's job or whoever's doing regression or anything like that. But when we do an update, a CU over the weekend or a service pack or something, all right, we're going to go through the list of solutions, and if we have testing instructions, we're going to make sure your stuff works, all right? Pretty straightforward. If we don't have anything, then we're just going to assume it works. And any ideas, classifications on different types of customizations? How about front-end customizations? All right, there's a whole bunch of those, right? SharePoint Designer customizations, content type customizations, list modifications, right? Are we going to try and govern those in our environment? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe not. Okay. What about server-side customizations? Is solutions scoped at different levels, right? EXEs that run. Service customization policies, and then development best practices. This is another one that gets me in trouble, okay? But what I typically like to do is go in and talk to the developers who are actually working there and say, hey, what are you guys doing, you know? What's already deployed, okay? How can we work around and realign some stuff to best practices? Best practices are one of those things that everybody has a different opinion on, all right? On some stuff, it's pretty straightforward, but the key there is communicating with the stuff that's already happening. So let's talk about customization requirements, all right? Our first step is we want to classify the types of customizations. What kind of customizations do you guys work with? Requirements, right? Features, solutions. Are you going to allow scripted installations, batched installations, EXE installations? I'll tell you honestly, my preference is to hand me a WSP. If you hand me an EXE, it's going to take much longer to get through the change control process. But if you hand me a WSP, I can open it up and see. It gets through code review faster. It gets through a lot of stuff faster. And then your requirements for error reporting in your environment. Do you guys have to write to ULS? Do you have to write to the event viewer? Do you have to write to, you know, some custom API that this organization's been using since 1989 to report errors in their environment? Okay. They didn't have APIs in 1989. Sorry. Okay. All right. Selling your customization rules, i.e. communicating with your developers. Don't call them guidelines, okay? Because guidelines are typically optional or ignored, exactly. They're suggestions, right? Do you want a chocolate?
I'm good.
You're good. In that first initial meeting that we meet with the SharePoint administrators, all right, let's go through just a couple general questions, all right? What are the security requirements, all right? Or maybe, and this isn't the first meeting, I'm sorry, this is at scope and this is at design finalization. But, you know, do you require a service account? Are you deploying machine services to the servers, okay? What's your anticipated usage? How are we going to scale this? If we have to add, you know, 3 additional web front ends to support your solution, how's that going to work, okay? How will your solution be affected by upgrades and patches, all right? And, you know, if we move to SharePoint 2013, you know, in most federal organizations that's slotted for like 2017, how will your customizations be affected by that? Will they be supported, all right? Usually, if you can have this conversation with your developers, all right, the next slide isn't really needed, okay, because they're already thinking about the things that will help make this solution permanent in the environment, make the solution supported, make the solution scalable. All right, but if that conversation doesn't go well, there's this. And the text on here is really small for a reason, okay? One, because I always thought it was funny when they say, if you want to make a really good PowerPoint presentation, don't make a slide with the text too small to read. And this is kind of like me saying, who cares? Second, there's no way we're going to cover every single rule, all right? You know, if you guys really want, well, hold on, we'll get to that. There's just too many of them, all right? And these are guidelines. They're going to be different for your organization. You might have some different rules here, all right? But I wanted to put these in here so that you could have it as a reference material. You're going to work with the developers. Oh, I'm sorry, actually I missed the part. The last reason that the text is really small is because these are mine, all right? And what I mean by that is that you're going to have to work these out in your company. All right. I am happy to share the presentation with you, and you can zoom in and see what these are. But I'm sure some of them you're probably very familiar with. Okay. What are some of the guidelines or rules or policies that you're going to want to give to your developers in your organization? What's one that I have forbidden? HTTP modules and HTTP handlers. All right, I don't like them.
Why?
Huh?
We can have HTTP modules and handlers.
Yeah, why?
Huh?
Why?
I don't like them.
Why? That's interesting. I want to know.
It actually comes down to support. Okay. For those, and I've let them go through before, depending on what it was actually for. You know, for like some redirects or some embedded like terms and acceptance type things. Okay, they're usually okay, but there's some authentication that it doesn't play nice with, depending on the environment. All right, there's some redirects that don't work well when you're trying to pass credentials in several different places. So you'll see, like for some of these, and like I said, this is kind of a sample. And some of these, it'll say strongly discouraged, but see the detail. You know, strongly discouraged is inline code. Okay, and it's see detail because there's about 13 million different definitions for what inline code is. Okay, so there's some that's fine that we don't care about. There's some that we don't care about. Part 3. Part 3 is the administrator's guide to your organization. This section is also kind of a tearaway. It's a separate document. It's your handbook for your administrators. All right, it's what your administrators need to know about working with your environment. Administrators don't need governance. They're the ones who govern. Just kidding. Sort of. So, handbook for administrators serves to talk about the processes. All right. Again, we're going to split it into 3 sections. Presentation information, which is information about the goals of the SharePoint team, how they're going to accomplish the technical mission. All right. How they're going to work with developers, how they're going to work with the operations team. How many people are in organizations where the SharePoint administrator is different than the systems administrator? Okay, so that's becoming more and more common. All right, how many are in organizations where the SharePoint administrator, or SharePoint is just another box that the administrators handle? All right, yeah, sure. Okay, so that's becoming more common. It's becoming more common where you have a dedicated SharePoint administrator, all right? But that means that he's not also the database guy, and he's not also the Windows guy, and he's not also the virtualization guy, which means that he has to interact with all those teams, all right? In fact, he usually, for the developers here, he usually has to go and advocate for you, for those other teams, for getting solutions through the change control process or getting stuff developed. So he's kind of sometimes the gateway between those other organizations. All right, how are you going to accomplish the technical mission? All right, we're going to talk about the roles and access of the SharePoint administration team. What level of access do you have as an administrator? All right, do you have full control of everything? Do you just administrate SharePoint? Do you not administrate SQL? Do you not administrate the Windows boxes? If you want to change something in SharePoint, what are you allowed to change? Okay? Nothing. All right. If you, so as an example, all right, what if we need to change something at the OS level in order to get SharePoint working right? Does the SharePoint admin have a right to do that by default? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on your organization and what that person does. All right, maybe it has to go through change control. Process information, part 2, activity tracking and solutions management. Okay, what kind of processes are we putting in place for tracking activities across the platform? Okay, how and when are updates applied? All right, how are custom solutions deployed? For each of those solution categories that we created in the earlier part of this document, all right, what's the process behind deploying those types of solutions? Okay, what kind of configurations need to be tracked? That relates back to the section we had a second ago about what kind of configurations are we allowed to do.
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. And then document the way that issues, updates, and configuration changes are communicated to the rest of the organization. Okay, so if you have a service pack coming out that you're deploying, who do you have to tell about it? Who needs to prepare for it? Do the development teams need 2 weeks to prep their dev environments and test their solutions so that you can then roll it out to pre-production, so that you can then roll it out to production? All right, what's the communication process for that? All right, that's stuff that you need to consider. As I've been joking about, there is sometimes kind of tension between the administrators and the developers, and that's not really the way it should be, you know? The administrators are there to support the platform, but the developers are there to make the platform sing and dance. So if you guys can work together on that, then you're going to help accomplish that technical mission that we talked about. All right, so process information. All right, information about how to actually get stuff done. Our process information is going to, okay, so on this one, what we're talking about is links to documentation. All right, where's our configuration document? Where's our capacity planning document? How frequently are those updated? All right, what's the schedule for releasing new information? Okay, links to knowledge bases, solutions and activities, and then links to related systems. All right, if you're not the SQL guy, and then your actual practical information. All right, this is the information that your administrators will skip to, as we talked to developers skipping to their section. This is the section administrators will talk about for their day-to-day basis type activities. All your standard operating procedures, okay? Documentation on your operational checklists, and then contacts for related systems is usually in this section. All right, so we'll break this down just a little bit. Here's a few sample standard operating procedures. Okay, I'll share the presentation. You guys can reference them if you'd like. And then I also put in here a few standard operational checklist items, all right, that your admins are going to want to go through on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. All right. Also on the slide that I showed that had the very, very small print of the customization guidelines, in the notes for that slide are links to Microsoft reference material on the type of customizations that they allow in their SharePoint Online environments, both for 2007 and for 2010. And I haven't found the one for 2013 yet, but I think it's all app model stuff. So